How are we going to make this thing actually finished as an audio and a visual thing? Let's look at what we've got. I went to freesound.org and I just browsed for sounds. I made myself an account because you have to do that to download them, but then I just browsed for sounds and I typed in words like boom. And once I typed in that word, I saw all these other tags: bang, bass drum, boom, bottle, explosion. Oh, cool. That gave me another word that people seem to be using. So this is sort of how I sort of navigate this place. How are the makers creating these sounds, tagging their sounds? Well, I'm just looking over here to see, and then I'm browsing and then downloading. Cool. So I downloaded some sounds, put them in a folder, and imported them into Premiere. How did I do that? I just went to the bottom and I right-clicked and chose import. You could also go File, Import, or Command I, and then I just clicked on my whole sounds folder and clicked import. You can import them one at a time if you want, but this gives you a handy little folder with all the sounds. Cool. So now I'm going to preview them to remember what I've got. So up here I double-click and it loads up here. Spacebar. Oh. Oh. It's just movie magic. Okay, so that's a chain sound. Cool. What do we have here? That's spooky. And it builds. So right, just sort of bare bones, sort of emotional tags now I'm putting on the sounds. Alright, so let's look at what we got here. I've got this slow fade up, and I kind of want to do something with that. So let's, yeah, I like this, the idea of that over that slow fade. So I'm going to click on my timeline, +++ to zoom in, and let's find that sound and drag it down here. See how it starts kind of sudden? If we just start in black. Did you hear that pop? How it pops in? I'm gonna hover when I'm the arrow. I'm in the middle. When I get that little red bracket, I'm at the edge. So I'm gonna right-click on the edge and just apply a default transition, which is basically just a fade. Right? No more pop. That's nice. Cool. As I'm working, I'm looking over here. These are my audio meters, and they're going up to -12, which is pretty good. That's good audible sound. The loudest sounds you've got might creep up a little bit. Your quieter sounds might go down to here. Below here is pretty near inaudible, right? So if your meters are down around here, that's going to be a problem because your piece will be so quiet compared to the other pieces that yours will sound like somebody screwed up the volume. Up over here. All right. That actually works pretty good. I want that sound to fade out a little more gradually, so I'm going to right-click on the edge and add a fade. Every time I think I've done something, I try to test it immediately so that I can move on with confidence rather than doing 6 things, realizing that something's wrong and not having a clue as to what the wrong thing is. I try to do a mini test every time. So fade up sound, fade down, love it. Now that I've used it, I'm going to try to mark it as rows so that I just remember that I've used that sound. So when I'm browsing, I have sort of a little visual cue as to what I've used and what's left, because this garbled text doesn't help me so much. These sounds are great. This is basically the same sound recorded several times, which means you get a little bit of variety. And a tiny bit of variety is really helpful because our ears are really great at picking up on when a sound has been used twice. If you use the same sound twice, either we feel it really strongly and it's appalling, or we feel it on some subconscious level and the piece just doesn't feel as rich. So that chain is different from that chain and different from that chain, right? And that difference matters. And what I want to do is I want to imagine that my lamp is swinging on a chain cord on a chain. And so I want to, it swings a couple times, so I want to pull a couple of these into my piece. And so how do I go about doing that? I'm going to drag the whole thing down here just going to put it down here for now. And I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. And I'm just going to chop it up first and then use it later. I'm going to play until I start to hear. And then I'm going to left arrow back. And I'm watching these meters for the chain sound to go away. So there it is. It just started right there. So I'm going to go one frame back from that. And I'm going to change to my little razor blade, which is the C key. Cut back to the arrow tool, which is the V key. And I'm going to delete that dead space, play the sound. Cool. That was the end of the jangles, I believe. I'm going to left arrow back into the jangles, right arrow out of them. Basically just watching until, yep, I'm in the end of the jangle. So right there. So then C key to cut and play forward. There's one. C key to cut. So this is dead space. So I'm going to delete it. There was another one. Right? Once you do this a couple times, you get pretty darn quick at it. And cut, and that's dead space. Cool. That one's bad. That one's alright. I didn't like those sort of half jangles. There we go. Okay, so there's 4 of them. That might be enough, so I'm just going to click and drag around them to select them all and bring them on back here. Now what I'm trying to do is sync. So I've chosen some sounds. The sound begins here. It's not necessarily the part we will feel as the center of the sound, right? There tends to be, like if I arrow through it and watch the meters, turn that off so that we're just listening to the sound. See how they rise up? That'll tend to be the feeling of the sound. So it's not quite at the start of the clip. The sound feels like it's got its center right around there. I'm just looking for a high point, a peak in the audio. It has sort of a second peak and then it dies out. So just keep that in mind as you're doing sync, that you're not necessarily syncing up the start of the actual rectangular sound clip. You're syncing up often the peak of the sound, if it's a percussive sound, right? So let's now look at my visuals. I'm going to turn off this sound for a minute. If I click the M, I'm going to mute this track. And what's this track? It's that roaring sound. So I'm going to mute that. See how now it's not playing. Okay. I turn my visuals back on. And then I'm going to look for the first thing. Whew. That was it. I want that nice big shing to have like a chain sound. Which one? Oh, that one or that one? I don't know. Anybody have any opinion? Third, yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. So, you can do this any number of ways. If you're really logical, you can decide the chain would make its chain sound at the bottom when it snaps tight. And then you kind of line up the visual bit. Or you can do it by feel, by just guessing and then playing. That felt a tiny bit late to me, so I'm going to just nudge this back. Do you see the minus 0.00001? That's 1 frame back. Let's try 2 frames back. That still feels a tiny bit late to me. That feels okay. It's really subjective. You might have thought the first one was awesome. And then there was the second swoosh, so I want another chain, and I've already got a problem now, which is that this sound isn't over, and I want to start a new one, so I need to put it somewhere. And I've already got a roar here on audio 2, so I'm going to come down to audio 3 and put my second chain sound right about there. That one felt pretty late, so let's go back 6 frames. I don't like that at all.
I don't think there's 2 jangles.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a half jangle. You want a half jangle for that little one.
Is this one too big?
Too
All right.
jangle.
So let's jangle number 2. Try that one
Jangle number
instead.
2. Jangle.
That feels better. It's just late now, so let's try 4 frames back. That still feels late. Oh, that's getting better. Whenever I think I'm on it, I keep going to make sure that I'm wrong in the other direction, and then center, right? If I haven't gone wrong on both sides, I don't know that I'm properly centered. It's kind of like pulling focus. You go out of focus too far, out of focus too close, and then come to focus. Do the same thing with your sync. Go early, go late, because you could find a better spot that you won't find unless you... Yeah, that feels early now. Huh? I don't know, does that feel early? Yeah, that's definitely early. So then we're going to scoot back this way. I kind of like that. That feels early still? All right, by Winston's decree, we're going to go forward. All right, that feels pretty good. Yes. And then the more cheaply made one was in Premiere. These ones were in Premiere. Okay. Cool. So now that I have those, I'm going to now look at listen to the combined sound. So I'm going to unmute this track.
That's good.
That's good. I like that. I took the time to make these. It's not doing much wiggling that's going to have a real cue to it. So I'm going to put these in, and you'll see if I mute that, right, it's way too much. So what I want to do is take the audio gain on this one and just take it down a notch. So if we're here and that's too much, and that's... You can think of audio in terms of decibels. That's what dB stands for. And each decibel mathematically cuts the sound in half. It's not really a useful metric, so I tend to go by stops of either 3 or 6 decibels. You will feel the change if you change it by 6 decibels, right? 6 decibels quieter is definitely noticeable. So if I want to notice this less, that's a fine starting point. -6 will be quieter, and it's still way too loud. So I'm going to say adjust by, I could do -6 more, but I'm going to go wild and go -12. That's getting down there, right? So now it's a sound that was too big until the volume was right, and now it's a more appropriate sound, right? So the quality of the jangle or the volume of the effect can get you at that sweet spot. Still feels a tiny bit too loud. I almost want it in that barely there zone. So I'm going to go another 6 down. There you go. Yeah, that's good. Isn't that good? It's very good. All right, I'm going to do one more at risk of driving you mad. This is about the pace of sound design work. There's no way faster through it. You're picking an idea and you're sticking with the idea until it functions, and then you're moving on. If you just glob things together, you'll get a lovely swamp that you have no control over and no precision and no real emotional affect that you are delivering. It'll be noisy, and that'll be better than nothing. And this one's way too loud since we've gone down that road. Oops. Audio gain. I'm going to jump all the way down there to about -24, I think is where I ended up. There, just barely there, right? Just kind of creeping onto the scene at -48, right? And then mixed with this, it'll probably be gone, but if it's there just enough to keep the swinging. Yeah, you can still hear it. These sounds are free, as in you didn't have to buy them, but they all are Creative Commons license, which asks that you attribute the maker. And the maker is embedded, at least at freesound.org, the maker is this right here. And so my sound credits now are going to look like this. I'm just going to go to the title card, and I'm just going to look at the names. And I'm going to make this nice and small, because they don't have to be gloriously displayed, but I'm going to... Is that even typing? There we go. And then I'm going to type Media 2009, and I'm going to type Melissa Bonds. People have the weirdest screen names. Kings Row. Right, blah, 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 blah. You might also put a line that says from freesound.org, and then you've done a really good job attributing your sound. So basically, someone who watches this film could go to freesound.org, type that in, and then discover all the work of that maker, right? That's how the Creative Commons system works, right? That's what attribution is that a watcher can say, whoa, that was a sweet explosion, right? They could go and find Javier Zumer's, Friedo Beck's explosion, learn that it was actually a little thin, and then start the mystery of how did they make that explosion that felt so rich and so perfect for the film, and dig deeper and then discover, right, how we built this thing, right? That's the joy of it. And for the makers, if any of them see this film and hear their sound, they can see their own name and feel really good about the fact that they contributed to this community. And you might think this is silly, but I got an email from somebody who saw their font and their credit in the film, and it was like a little thank you note email, like for attributing the work that they did. And so basically you try to turn it around and you say, what if somebody took your whole film and pasted it into the background of put it on a TV screen where actors were doing, because the TV had to be on in the scene, right? And you saw your film in another film, right? It would be nice if someone was like, hey, a person made this and worked hard to make it, right? That's the goal of attribution. I think that takes us to the end of sound design. Is any of that confusing? Does anybody have any questions on what sound design is? It's a lovely process that's so worth it. I highly recommend wrapping up your visuals a little early, even if they have more that could be done to them. Try to wrap them up with time to devote to sound design, because that's really how the piece becomes immersive and rich and effective as cinema.